I am the CEO of Rutledge.com, the creator of the Rutledge Perspective podcast, and now I am the host of the Rutledge Perspective on KCOH-TV, The Boost, and I am so excited. My background in human resources and also in business and consulting has given me the opportunity to share information with all of you. And what we're going to do is talk about the foundational pieces, whether or not you're building a business or you're building a career. It all comes down to strategy and people. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know who needs to be on your team? So please join me, join in the conversation, catch the show both on the radio, on the app, and also on Facebook. And I will be on Tuesdays from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you there.
Good morning. It is Tuesday. Good morning, Kentucky. Kentucky, y'all need to do this now. I'm counting on you, Kentucky. Good morning, Texas. It is Tuesday. I just now posted my little studio picture because, you know, it's been one of those days. But it started out really great. Had a great session this morning with the senior HR leaders in Houston, HRL in Houston, talking about benchmarking, and that was awesome. And then got all the way down the street, realized I didn't have my mask. So I had to turn it around and go get a mask because, you know, but Jerry reminded me she has masks here, but, you know, I needed to be cute on camera. So I had to go get my cute mask. So we are going to start with some PSAs again. And then we're going to talk about messaging. We're going to talk about messaging because I had a huge aha, and you'll hear it on my podcast too this week. So vote. See, the camera's turned around, so I never know which side to point at. Vote. I did vote. I voted early. Texas is killing it, y'all. Keep it up. We have more people have already early voted than in California. It's awesome. Millions already voting. So keep it up. Go early vote. Make sure that you take all your information with you because there have been a couple of stories, and I went to Snopes and checked them. Because I'm not trying to put out additional bad information. Make sure you take your information because there was just somebody who posted where he had to take his dad back to the polls because the polls turned him around and said he wasn't registered. So the son went online and checked. He was indeed registered, so he took him back. So guys, one, don't let them tell you you're not registered. If they tell you you're not registered, tell them that you want a provisional ballot that they are required by law to give you. A provisional ballot. So you make sure you ask for that if they're trying to tell you you can't vote. And then make sure you check before you go. Take your ID, take everything with you. Don't let someone steal your vote. And with all the lines, I mean, people are lined up to vote. I am so proud of people. I'm so proud of people. They are trying really hard, and y'all know what day I'm talking about, trying really hard to suppress the vote and to keep people from voting. And we are not having it, and I love it. So thank you all for taking the time, taking the energy, taking the effort, for understanding whatever your vote is, for understanding that it's important that you do it. Good morning, California, that you understand that you vote. And so I know most of y'all don't know me, but I'm so excited that you guys are getting out there and voting. It makes me so happy. So anyway, so keep voting. Here's what's going on the census, y'all. Okay, so the census was supposed to not be done until the end of October 31. And then there was a claim or a fight about that because the current administration wanted to stop it. They didn't want to make sure everybody was counted, given the pandemic. And there was an injunction against that, so they said, no, you have to keep going. Well, that injunction has been stopped again. So theoretically, the count stopped, I believe it was last week. But please keep your eyes open because there are people fighting this to make sure everybody gets counted because this impacts the number of representatives we have. It impacts our funding for roads, for infrastructure, for schools, for healthcare. So please keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open for your friends, for your family, for everybody. Make sure you are paying attention so that if you didn't fill it out, that you can still try to fill it out because I know people are fighting to make sure that it gets opened again so that we can make sure everyone is counted. So that's on the census. The other thing for you to start paying attention to if you haven't already is we're getting close to the end of the year, which means the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, that is up at the end of the year. The PPP programs, those are up at the end of the year. Make sure you're doing what you need to do and talking with your financial advisor so that you can have the appropriate amount of auditing and reporting and all that kind of stuff so you don't get in trouble if you got a PPP. Many of the things that happened through the stimulus package end 12/31/2020. So make sure you are talking to your advisors, your financial advisors, your legal advisors to know what you need to do to make sure you are prepared so that you don't get caught off guard at the end of the year going into 2021. Also, as you're looking at going into the end of the year, check with your companies, because we were just having this conversation this morning. Again, this is all the top HR leaders in Houston. An amazing group of individuals, by the way, let me tell you. So this is, if there has been no time in history that HR people were important, now is the time. HR people and IT people, this is your time to shine. So IT people, don't start with no, start with how can we do it, right? Because IT people, your job is to protect us and make sure that people aren't getting into systems and putting viruses and all that. We get that and we appreciate you so much. But just like that first question is always, did you unplug it and plug it back in? Stop that. Yes, because anybody today knows to do that first. Don't start with no, start with a solution. HR people, it's I don't even have words for all the stuff that you're having to do right now and deal with. But the good thing is that, especially as we come towards the end of this year, being in this months and months, decades of this pandemic, and we're getting close to the holidays. So all of those things that people have been experiencing around isolation, around separation, or that they've been experiencing around having too much family time, because that's happening too. The mental health pressures, the stress, all of that kind of stuff is really exacerbated during this time. And so HR people at companies are really working with their vendors and their employee assistance programs, those EAP programs, to make sure that employees know that there's access to those. Those are really important. But also understanding that it's behavioral, mental, it's also financial. You can get all kinds of help through an EAP program. So do not be ashamed, because an EAP program, employee assistance program, the company does not get the detailed information of you. They can't. That's private information. They know how many people use the program, but they don't say, John Smith used it because they were about to have a nervous breakdown. They don't get that. There are rules, if you are a danger to yourself or someone else, there are some things around that. But in general, they don't get the details of who went and what you went for. So please take advantage. Those services are, in most companies, the EAP is free. And we heard this morning, several people were saying, while some EAP only give you a certain amount of visits to mental health professionals during a year, right now, many of them are going to unlimited. So take advantage for you, for your family, for your kids. Kids are under a lot of pressure right now. That whole visibility thing, always being on Zoom, not being able to kind of hide in the back of the classroom. Judgment being passed. I forgot my belt. Judgment being passed because how does your house look? What kind of computer do you have? What kind of clothes you wear? All this kind of craziness. So just be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to your family. Be kind to your kids. Just be kind. It does not cost you anything to be kind. So please be kind. So make sure you're paying attention to your organization, and if there's a way for you to get access to employee assistance, please do that. Don't sit in pain. Don't sit in overwhelm. Don't sit in a place where you don't think that you have any other choices, because you always have a choice. Reach out to somebody, make a call. Okay. So I want to thank all of you who attended the seminar last week on career strategy. It was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 12, 13, 14, the career strategy. It was just awesome. I had a really good time with the people that were on it. And even looking at that made me think about some pivots I want to do, because I really am enjoying these smaller, intimate groups. So, small, 10 to maybe 40 people. So I don't need 10,000 people on a group. I really would love to have, those smaller groups where we can really interact and we can really engage. So thank you all for attending that. They will start again in 2021. So I am spending the rest of this year really digging into the things I tell you guys to do. Strategy. What are you doing? How are you going to do it? What does that look like? Putting the numbers together, all that kind of stuff. I'm doing all of that between now and the end of the year. And I'm going to go see my mama a couple times. So what we're going to talk about today is messaging and communication. And here's the thing. I am not, and I'm not claiming to be a communications expert, because that's not the point. The point is that at the end of the day, communication only happens when the message that you send is the message that was heard. And we talk about that a lot, as you grow up, people talk about hearing and are you listening or are you hearing, and all of these things we hear over and over again. But I had a really interesting aha over the weekend. So I do a lot of self-talk. I always have. I tend to be very self-reflective, and on this show I'm really transparent with y'all because why not? So I do a lot of self-talk, a lot of self-evaluation. I've done that all the time. I can get in my head a lot, and I've worked really hard to make most of that as positive as possible, as forward-moving as possible. Not perfection, but progress. And so there's a lot of things I've been speaking over in my business and over, friends of mine and things like that. And so I've been hearing these words and things I wanted to do about visibility and publicity and all of these kind of things. No, it's not COVID, Jerry. And it's not the flu, because I took a flu shot. As much as I hate needles, I took a flu shot. I've been hearing, really speaking these words of positivity around the business and visibility and getting out there and playing big and all that kind of stuff. And I kept saying it because practice makes perfect. So if you continue to say things, we become what we believe, right? You are what you think, all of those cliches. And so continuing to speak positivity over what you want and how you're living and all that kind of stuff. Good morning, Odessa, Texas. It's important to practice speaking those things that are positive and forward moving. And so I was doing that, and I was listening, and I was hearing, and I was, being intentional and all that kind of stuff. Well, then I met someone on Friday, had a call with her, and she is a branding and marketing person. She is like a personal brand. She was in brand marketing for a very, very long time with really big companies. And when she went out on her own, she still had some really big clients, and now she and her husband have kind of started their own agency. And she's just an incredible human, by the way. I was introduced to her by another friend of mine. And we started talking about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to go. And I'm like, I really, really, really want to push this brand this year because I am the brand, and all this stuff, all these cliches. And finally she looked at me and she said, okay, that's great. And I'm looking at your site and I love your website, and you're telling me about all the stuff you do and how the way you serve people and how you show up and whether it's HR and whether it's individual, and that's great. She said, but none of that matters because what they're really buying is you. And I was like, phew. And I knew that, and I've been saying that I am the brand. And even another friend of mine, see, it takes me 3 times to get something, y'all. Another friend of mine even told me, Laurel, that's great that you're doing all that stuff, but the value is in you. People want you. Mm-hmm. So as I was talking to her and I was having this revelation, I thought, here's the thing. So it wasn't so much about my message and what I'm doing. I just shared that with y'all because it's context of the story. It was interesting to me that what showed up is we don't always hear what we're saying. Because when we are speaking, we hear the words and we hear the tone and we hear all that kind of stuff. It's not that we don't hear, we're hearing that stuff. But are we really listening to and internalizing what we're saying, the message? And we don't, because we're paying attention to what we're saying. We're planning our next word. We're planning our next response. That's why they say you should listen to understand and not listen to respond. So when we are doing self-talk on our own, are we really listening to our message? Because she took my words, repeated the words to me that I had said to her, my exact words a couple times. And only when I heard them coming at me, coming in my ears, my mouth was closed, my ears were open, only then did I hear it. Only then did I really say, wow. And what does that mean? And how is that big? And yes, this is what playing big means. This is what being the brand means. And I am the brand. And so as I kept thinking about that, I thought, as leaders, we spend an awful lot of time talking. And as the old folks used to say, you got one mouth and 2 ears. You should listen more than you speak. And we often, especially now, because there's so much going on, we are working so hard to make sure people have information. Information about return to work, information about benefits, information about pay, information about health, information from the CDC, information about voting. We are talking a lot. A lot. Everybody's talking. Good morning, Longview. Good morning, Richmond. We are talking a lot. And so what we're not doing as much of is listening, at least not listening deeply. And then some of us are getting tired of listening because there's a lot of noise going on right now too, right? A lot of noise. But when it's important for you to understand something, when it's important for you to get a message across or to really breathe into your own messaging, what's critical is to practice the pause, just slow down, stop, and listen. And listen to understand. Don't listen to respond. Because if you're listening to responding, you're not really listening. You're not really listening. What you're doing is thinking. And when we're speaking, we're activating our brain, we're activating our mouth, right? But we're not necessarily activating our ears. And when we listen, we're activating our brain, we're activating our ears. But if we're listening to respond, what we're really doing is thinking about a strategy. We're not thinking about the person that's talking to us and what their message is. And the power of listening to understand is that you can actually strengthen your argument by understanding what somebody else's position is. Or you just may learn something that you didn't know if you're willing to slow down and just listen. Because none of us knows everything. We've said that before, right? None of us knows everything. So when you really start thinking about the messenger versus the message, we often will practice how we want to say something and what we want to say and how are we clear, because y'all know how I feel about clarity. You got to be clear. It's not unkind to be clear. But we don't practice that same thing with ourselves and with the messages we're telling ourselves and with our own self-talk. Because the thing with self-talk is when you are pumping yourself up or you're telling yourself something or you've got your own personal narrative, your narrative is competing with every other narrative that was deep-seated in you from a long time ago. From a childhood trauma, from an incident where you felt really bad and you didn't even know that's still showing up, from a really toxic work environment. So all of those stories are there. All of those narratives are there that have really seated deep and they've gotten sticky. They've gotten really sticky. But if you don't listen to what you're saying to yourself, that doesn't have the same opportunity to get sticky. And it's hard for us to listen to ourselves. In fact, I would argue sometimes you listen to yourself more closely when you're not speaking out loud. That's why journaling is so powerful. Meditation is so powerful. Just praying is so powerful because it's internal, right? Now we pray out loud too, pray unceasingly. But when you are just having to go into your brain, you're not necessarily listening audibly, you're having to really listen emotionally, listening spiritually, listening, with your essence kind of thing, without getting too woo-woo. It really forces a different kind of understanding, a different kind of focus. So, when we think about the messages we deliver and we think about how we actually believe messages and how we lean into messages and take them as truth, the thing that came up to me was, when we were little, if your parents or your guardian or whoever it was told you something about whatever, whether it was not necessarily something to do, but gave you a perspective on what something that was, it was very easy for us to say, yeah, whatever. They don't know. They're not experiencing the way I'm experiencing, whatever, right? To negate it. But when your crazy aunt that you loved or your best friend or somebody else said that same thing, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Now I get it. And you may have even gone back to that parent or guardian and said, oh, do you know what they said? And you're all excited and you believe it. Because the message was the same, but the messenger was different. And there was something about the change in messenger that changed your ability to hear and understand and internalize the message. And that's what we have to think about when we're talking to ourselves. Whether we're talking to ourselves about trying to, get a business up or trying to redo our backyard, because I see one of my friends online just posted her in our Black Women Who Love Outdoor Living Spaces, her new patio. Can't wait to see it in person, by the way. Or we're trying to figure out what we want to do with a job, or trying to figure out, losing weight, working out, painting a room, whatever it is. If we're not willing to sit still and listen, our ability to tackle that thing is not impossible, but it sure does make it harder. It makes it a lot harder because we're not in a space where we can gather information that gives us a perspective to be able to act in a way that gets us where we want to be. Pretty simple. But it's not easy to do because we're not trained to really listen to ourselves. And most of us are not really trained anyway. We're trained to be able to respond. We're trained to take whatever someone's saying and argue. We see that play out every day where people just aren't listening anymore to each other. No one's paying attention anymore. There is a lack of a sense of decorum. I won't say no, because there are many, many people I think who are coming forward who are like, this is just nuts and we need to go back to some level of civility. But there are many, many people who are demonstrating how listening is a key component of understanding and of interaction that is kind. That does not necessarily mean you have the same opinions, but that the interaction is based in dignity and respect. And so having that same dignity and respect for yourself is important in your ability to listen to the messages that you're saying. You're right, Lena. Interesting how women are often not heard. Then when the man is saying the same thing, the statement is absolutely yes and yes and yes again. And so it's that whole idea of, they always said, don't shoot the messenger, right? Sometimes the message gets lost in the package. And so how do we move through and get past our own biases, not only with others, but our own personal biases and internal biases, to say, it's not about that issue. It's not about the messenger. It's about the message. Is there something in the message that is valuable for me, that is important for me, that moves me forward or keeps me safe, that I need to get? And how do I make sure that the messages that are coming my way get through and don't get blocked simply because the messenger doesn't work for me? Because not every messenger is going to work for everybody. That's why we have differences of opinion. That's why we have different political parties. That's why we have all kinds of differences. That's why some people wear purple and some people wear green. Every messenger is different, and the way they deliver a message will be different. That's why some leaders that some people love, other people think, I cannot believe you're listening to that person. Because part of the delivery system is trust. Part of the delivery system is authenticity and connection. And that's why those self messages also get hard. Because if we are not connected to who we are and what we want and clear about that and open about that, it makes it very hard for us to take messages in, our messages to ourselves, but also messages from other people that are meant to help us, that are meant to develop us and grow. It's also why when you look for a mentor or an ally or a sponsor, that you're looking for someone that is going to tell you the truth. You're not looking for someone who's just going to pump you up all the time. Because the message you need to hear may be about something you need to modify. It's not always something you need to fix. It may just be something you need to modify, or something you need to learn, or some experience that you haven't had, or some exposure that you haven't had that gives you a different perspective. But if we are not getting that message from a messenger that we trust, that we believe in, that we have respect for, it doesn't matter how important the message is or how on point the message is, because we're not going to get it. And we will have missed out on something that could be game changer. It could be life changing. It could be something that keeps us safe. But because we are so caught up in the messenger and who the messenger is, or we're ignoring the messenger completely and we're so focused on other stuff, we miss the blessing in the message. We miss the thing that we're supposed to learn because we're all caught up in the physical or the tactical. We're not listening for the thing that is going to make a difference for us. And it is exponentially more difficult when it's you talking to you, because there's nobody there to put you in check. There's nobody to say, are you listening? Here's a prime example when you know that you are not really listening, or you're more focused on the delivery of your message than the receipt of the message. Often people will say, did you hear what you just said? And if you hear somebody say that to you and you're like, no, what did I say? That means you weren't really paying attention. All you were doing was thinking about just the words or about just moving. You weren't thinking about the delivery of a message. You weren't thinking about communicating. You were just talking. I often I'll go out and I'll speak for some people, or I'll do a webinar or a panel or something, and someone will come back to me and say, oh, that was so good. Can you say that again? Jerry's done that to me a couple times. Can you say that again? I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. Not exactly the way I said it before. See, it was stream of consciousness. I know that I meant what I said. And I know that what I said was impactful, but to say it exactly the same way is practically impossible because I'm in a zone, right? I'm in the moment. And so I often come back to that and say, but Laurel, does that mean you weren't listening? Does that mean you weren't listening? Does that mean you weren't paying attention to whether or not the people on the other end are actually going to get what you need or get what they need? And that you are actually just a vessel for a message that someone else needs to hear. Because when you're in service, it's not about you. It's about the person you're serving. So even when you're talking about self-talk and messages you say to yourself, you are serving yourself. It's not about just the physical you or any of that. This is really about you being service to you. This is about self-care, right? This is about ensuring that you put yourself on the list. So when you're having those conversations, if it's not something you would say to somebody else, why are you saying it to you? That's a legitimate question. If what you're saying is so hurtful, so direct, so ugly, so untrue, so whatever, that you would never say it to anyone else, why are you okay with saying it to yourself? Because the same way it would hurt the other person, it's going to hurt you. You may not recognize it in the moment, but it is going to hurt. It's going to come back, it's going to show, and it's going to show up when you least expect it. So it's necessary for us to think about not only the messages that we're sending, but how we are sending them and to whom we're sending them. And for us, who we're getting them from and how we are accepting them or how we are hearing them. And are we listening and just listening to words and tone and all that kind of stuff? Or are we actually hearing what somebody is saying? Right? I'm listening to you, but do you hear me? And it's important to pause and to be silent and to really absorb what someone is saying, because only when you do that can you make a decent decision about what's important and what's not, and what's true and what's not. Because if you're not taking the moment to really listen, you can't understand if there's something that's really great for you to learn, or if it's like, that's stuff that really is not healthy or helpful for me. And while I appreciate the attempt, I'm going to let that go. But if you don't take the time to really listen to what someone is saying, you don't know. And you may just take it all. And all of a sudden you've got a tape playing in your mind that says you can't, you shouldn't, you won't, you're unable to, you're bad, you're whatever. And none of that may be true. But because you have not taken the time to really, really listen to the message, because you were telling yourself or somebody that you didn't trust was saying it to you, you missed the opportunity to learn something, to gain some information.
What if someone is trying to give you financial advice and they're broke all the time? Do you take the time to listen? I'm being serious.
Jerry, you crack me up. So, but that's a good question. What if somebody's trying to give you medical advice and they're not a doctor? What if, all those kind of things. So when experts try to give you expert advice, or non-experts try to give you expert advice, here's the rule I follow. If I trust the person and their intent, I listen because it is respectful to listen. And then because I am listening, I can discern what makes sense and what does not. And we always have the option to double check.
I was just looking at a battle on Facebook of people, they're fighting back and forth about something political. Mm-hmm. And none of them had really the right situation, and none of them really fact checked. That one was asking the other one, did they fact check this, fact check that? So because being in media, I'm used to fact checking and stuff. And even as a little kid, I always say, "Who told you that? Where you get that from?" And I used to get a whooping behind that.
Right.
But because I want to make sure I'm accurate about it. And I think that right now, because of social media, everybody has a voice, but doesn't mean it's the right voice.
Exactly.
Because when I see a lot of things reposted, it's from unreputable sources.
Right.
Like, who's ever heard of this magazine and newspaper?
Right.
So how do you eliminate some of that in this?
Well, I don't know that we can eliminate any of it. It's too broad, right? It's too broad right now. But what you can do is you can be smarter about it. You don't believe everything you read. You don't believe everything you see. You don't believe everything you hear. You ask questions. It is not unkind to be clear. You know what? I didn't understand that. Can you say that one more time? Or, wait a minute, did you get that? I'll give you a prime example, because I think this happened after the show last week. There was a post, did I talk about this? There was a posting going around about polling, and if somebody marked on your ballot, it would invalidate your vote?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an example of that. That went wildfire. It was everywhere. If somebody marks on your ballot, you need to say you need a new ballot, because that's going to invalidate your vote and they're not going to count it, and blah, 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 blah. And I saw this from people I trust. But I was paying attention. I was paying attention to what I was reading. I was paying attention to what I was hearing. I was paying attention to what I was seeing. And what I saw was the text of this little post was the same. It was exactly the same wording. Exactly. Not just kind of. Exactly the same words. But it always said it came from somebody different. And then please share, right? So I decided to fact check. And it wasn't true. It wasn't true. But it started in South Carolina, and then somebody believed it, and that's how things happen, right? It's like telephone game, right? You used to play, or the secret game, gossip game, where somebody says something in somebody's ear, and goes around the circle, and by the time it gets back to the very first person, it's completely different. So you have to, even if it's someone who is an expert or claims to be an expert, there is nothing that keeps you from doing your own checking.
But didn't you say something about it? But you said, I don't know this to be true, but you need to fact check.
I did. So I went out and I said, look, I think this may be bots. Because I went and fact checked it, and here's what I found in my fact checking. But if you still think it's a problem, ask somebody.
You did.
Ask. Call somebody official and ask. Don't even take my word for it. You guys have heard me say that on the show. Don't even take my word for it. If you are concerned, go ask someone official. Now, I try really hard and make every effort to make sure that anything I share here, beyond just opinion or beyond my experience, is factual. Because my experience is my experience. It's the facts of my experience. But anything around voting or the census or FFCRA or any of that, I do my best to make sure that I'm giving you actual data from reputable sources. And my expectation is that you check me too. And if you find something that I missed, say something. Go on Facebook, just say, hey, Laurel, you missed this. Or, hey, I found this extra thing. I will not be offended. Now, don't be ugly. But I won't be offended. Because the point is to educate, and the point is to get good information out there. That's the point.
Today, I wanted to talk about some things in the political arena. And I knew that I had a certain amount of knowledge of that information. So I called someone that I knew who is a political advocate.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times we're not doing that because there are people who have a range of knowledge that we don't have, that it's best to, and especially if you, like you said, you trust the source, to get them to help you in some areas you may need help in. And I think a lot of times we just run off what we see from other people and haven't vetted them, the sources. Right.
And, and even your sources, when there's people, because you said something that's really important, we go to people that we trust. We also got to be honest. It's that same self-talk. We also got to be honest. I trust this person, but I trust this person because they always are aligned with what I think.
I trust them when they have receipts, when you can go back and see that this is what they really do.
Yes.
And they're successful in it.
Right.
But you're right.
So, but there are people who, I'm going to trust you because every time we have a discussion or an argument, you say the same thing I say, so you must be all right. You must know what you're talking about because you're not challenging my perspective. I love it when people challenge my perspective and I have to think about something differently. Because it either solidifies my position or it makes me say, ooh, that's a good point. And in either case, I've learned something. I've either learned that, yes, absolutely, I am standing firm, or, yeah, you might want to do a little bit more research on that because you just got some information that you didn't know that may change your perspective.
There's a meme going on Facebook when you said that. Let me ask this question. Good morning, Bishop. There's a meme that's going on Facebook saying, okay, so you had to dig up years and years of what's on one candidate, but I'm going by what they're doing today. So is that changing your perspective, or are there some deal breakers that, because I said something the other day on Facebook too, and then I checked myself and I said, no, was that rude? Was that right? Should you have said that like that? But then after I checked myself, as you said, you're always right when you check your own self.
Right.
I did check myself. And said, but that is not,
That's
this
your
is the deal
perspective.
breaker. If you can agree with people who are thieves, rapists, whatever, that's not what I do.
Yeah.
So
Right.
when is it a principle and when is it something that maybe you can learn from their perspective?
You know, that's a really good question, because our principles, our values, we'd like to believe that they are all grounded in fact, but they aren't always. They just aren't always. We have evidence of that right now. We've had evidence of that since 1619. Not every perspective, not every principle is grounded in fact. It is not a fact that all black people sink and can't swim.
Yeah.
What is a fact is if you have 2% body fat, it is highly likely that if you just jump in the pool and don't even try, you're going to sink. You don't have enough fat. I don't have that problem.
Yeah, I mean,
So, you know, there are many things that people have principles about, that a certain group of people, a certain gender of people, a certain kind of person, or a certain kind of food, a certain kind of car means something. So, like I worked with someone, I will never forget this. I worked with someone because this is a person that worked with me and threw a book at me in a meeting. Oh yes. That's a different story for a different day. But I remember this person would bring their lunch to work every day in like a grocery bag, you know, the little plastic bags you get from the grocery store. And then as he would sit and eat lunch, he would see people come in with either their lunch or something else. And he would go on a tirade with people about how they were going to go to hell because they were being wasteful, because he had been using this same sack for 2 weeks.
I didn't know that.
And that if they had any kind of debt, they were a sinner. And on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And here's the point of that. Those were his principles,
Right.
based on something he had read and interpreted as fact and truth. Fine, we all have that opportunity. However, his principles elicited behavior that was unacceptable. It was unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable behavior. So when we think about, you know, what we're grounded in our values, grounded in our principles, that does not mean that our values and our principles are the only ones, or that our values and our principles are the only ones that are right. It just doesn't. As much as we'd love to say that, it just doesn't. And so there are many principles and values that are grounded in things that are just inaccurate. Especially when you look at corporate America and the history of corporate America. If you look at the history of just about any country, decisions about who could have access to what, about who has rights to what, broad-based. So this is not a racial discussion. This is a broad-based discussion. All of those things, if you go back and look at where it was written, are all grounded in some principle or some value that justified the action. All the way back to Caesar, right? So there are we can stand on principle and we can stand on value. And I think the majority of people really do kind of sit in a place that is, you know, we're all human, we're all connected, treat people kindly, you know, love one another. I think most people try to sit somewhere in that space. But there are those who truly believe that what they believe is the only belief, and anyone who believes differently is not worthy to exist. And those people can be a little bit dangerous, and you need to be aware of them. And that's why you also listen, because people will reveal themselves to you early.
Yes,
believe them the first time. That's why it's really important to listen. Talk less, listen more. Because people will tell you where they stand. Even the most crafty people will tell you where they stand if you listen hard enough and long enough.
Even if they don't say anything.
Even if they don't say anything. Because listening is not just with your ears. You listen with your eyes too. All that nonverbal. You listen to tone. You listen to inflection. You listen to the words that are used. You listen, you know, body language. Distance. Are you making eye contact or not? Are their arms crossed or not? There's so much that people tell you about just how they engage with you on a physical level. That's beyond what they're saying to you in words.
I just said last night that some people have hidden behind glass and they were very transparent. We were just distracted. Because you can see if you're paying attention and looking and listening, as you say, but sometimes we're such a rush.
Yes.
We're not paying attention to keywords and body movement.
We have to practice the pause. We have to practice the pause. Some of the good things that have come out of this craziness that we're in now, because there's always good in everything. There's some good in everything. It's forced many of us to really slow down. Mm-hmm. It has really forced many of us to slow down. And I think that slowing down is the only reason I recognize this whole deal about the self-speak and listening to our own messages and how the messenger can really impact the message. I knew that. I've always known that. But something happened during this time where I've had to slow down and had to really think and had to really focus, that I experienced that. That I really experienced it. And so I've seen it. I've called it out. I've heard it. All of those things. I've told people about it. We've talked about it. But to actually experience some of the things that we're experiencing now gives us not only an opportunity to learn and grow and develop, but it also reminds us to really practice the pause. To really take the time to figure out what it is we're trying to do and where we're trying to go and why. And who we are and what we want and why. Why? Because the answer to that question gets you to root cause. And that's a good question to ask about principles and values. Because when you ask why do you believe that, I don't know, women shouldn't vote? Why do you believe that? And that conversation around, they're too emotional, they don't have the capacity, all that stuff, none of that is actual fact. None of that. So the principle is based on a belief that is not necessarily based on fact. But it became somebody's guiding principle for how things were going to be developed. Right? So we have to, let me rephrase that, because we don't have to do anything. It is important to try to be discerning. It is important to be willing to look at yourself. It is important to be willing to take messages from just about anyone, even the messages that we're seeing now on the far ends of the spectrum, both sides, all sides, the far ends. It is important to even take in that kind of stuff, because if nothing else, you know what doesn't work for you. Just like they say, some of the best bosses you can ever have are horrible bosses, because you can learn more from a horrible boss sometimes than you can from a great boss, because you learn how not to lead, how not to behave, how not to engage. Mm-hmm. And that's valuable information too. It's valuable to know how to do something, but it's also valuable to know what not to do, because that helps you prevent pain, that helps you prevent failure, right? And I'm even trying to get away from that word failure, because it's all learning. That's another thing that's come to me during this, time where you had to be still. It's not about the failure, it's about the learning. It's about the blessing in the mess, right? So it's important as we think about all of the messages that are coming at us now, because we have access to more information now than ever in history. Ever in history. So much information from so many places. And with all that information comes so much responsibility. And we have gotten responsibly lazy.
Yeah.
We have gotten intellectually lazy. And I am spreading peanut butter. I know I am. We have gotten intellectually lazy. Because access to information is so easy, we can just click a button. It takes a little extra effort to say, wait, did I read what I read? Did that really make sense? If I connect that to the stuff that I know to be true, is that still valid? We don't necessarily take the time to do it. We're just clicking like. We're just clicking respond. We are listening to respond. We're looking stuff up just to get a quick answer, as opposed to really gathering information. So it's important to practice this pause and to take the time to understand the messages and not let the message get caught up in the messenger, and not let the message get negated by the messenger, or not let the message get pumped up to be truth when it's not, because of who sent the message. And no better time than now, when all of these commercials are coming out. So guys, commercials are meant to sell. That's why they're in place. They are meant to sell. So every single one of them is selling a perspective. Do your own research. Do your own research. Decide what you want to do. It's just like any other product. Go find out if it works for you. Don't let them tell you it works for you. You go decide if it works for you. For those of you who are really, really into, organic and green and vegan, and you don't just buy something, you go look up every single ingredient before you even spend one dime on it. Because you don't want to put anything in or on your body that is not cruelty free, right? Or vegan or organic or what have you.
Even reviews are not always
we know that people buy reviews.
Yeah.
So the same research you do for that stuff that nourishes you, that keeps you safe, how about you use that same discerning to look at everything that comes your way as much as possible? Now there's a lot, and so you can't, dissect everything. There's just not enough hours in the day. We all got other stuff to do. But when it's something that's important upon which you're going to be making a decision, you owe it to yourself to do a little bit more research.
Or if you're going to share it.
And especially if you're sharing it as truth. Because there are things that I've seen people share and they're like, I'm not sure if this is true. I didn't fact check it. But if it is, this is a problem.
There's one thing they shared the other day, and it's from a reputable source, but it's not true. And it was that President Trump said something about he would be a Republican because they're dumb and whatever. But as much as you probably may or may not like him, you can't run with that just because he said that.
Right.
So when I fact checked it, the reputable sources said this was not true.
Mm-hmm.
But this has been shared for years. And a lot of times you look at the name on top of it and you take it for truth when it's not truth.
Right.
Because in this day and time, people can doctor stuff up and do whatever.
Right. And that's the challenge right now too. I was listening to a show on artificial intelligence. And man, I tell you what, if you are listening and paying attention, this is an amazing time to be alive, an amazing time to get stuff done. And it's also pretty dang scary what technology can do, right? And people who refuse to use their genius for good instead of evil. Because AI is really moving to the point where you can just put an avatar up there.
Yeah.
Because with all the audio books and all the videos, and somebody can actually take and make an avatar of you and put it out there in a commercial as if you said it. And here's the thing. You probably said every single word that is in that avatar and in that video. Everything you see is truth. What is not truth is context and how they put it together. So it's you. It's your words, your voice, your face, it's all that stuff. But someone has cobbled together all of this data so that instead of you saying, I need to clean my house, you said, my house is infested with whatever. And at some point you said all of those words. So they just stuck it together.
That's what they did with Dr. Fauci in that ad.
Exactly.
It wasn't so high tech. Those were his words.
Yes.
It's just editing.
And so you got to really be discerning more now than ever, which is what is scary to me because we have gotten intellectually lazy. We have not really continued to teach people how to think critically. We have created a space and a world in which things are so easily accessible. We don't have to think as hard or as much. That is really concerning because it's hard for you to know. It's hard for you to know what's real and what's not, what's truth and what's not, especially if you don't take the time or if you don't care. Now, if you don't care, I can't do anything about that. But if you care and don't have the time, it's a scary time. It's a scary time because there is so much going on that is just simply untrue or taken completely out of context so that the words may be true, but the context is so bad that it is a falsehood in its nature. On its surface, it's true. In the context and in the depth, it is untrue. And it takes time and energy and effort to look at that and discern that and decide. It just does. And not everybody's willing to do that. And not all of us have time to do that. It's one of the things, like all the debates and all the stuff that happens. I can't watch hardly anything in real time now. Not just this. I can't watch anything in real time. My attention span is not what it used to be. But some of those I don't watch in real time because I want to be able to have my mind right and be able to really listen and focus and I know if I'm watching it in real time, my nerves are bad, right? I'm like, I just cannot right now. But if I come back to it at a time where I'm just peaceful and calm and quiet, then I can really listen to understand. I can listen to see consistency and inconsistency. I can listen to see discrepancies. I can listen to see truth and facts and all that other stuff that's important to me. So you have to decide what's important to you and then act accordingly. And not get so caught up in the messenger that you miss the message, good or bad. Because again, if you're paying attention to the message, people will reveal themselves to you early, believe them. People will tell you who they are. They'll tell you what they want. They'll tell you what they want you to do. All of that stuff comes through if you will only listen and if you will only pay attention. And yes, Leela, everybody needs to fact check. Must absolutely fact check. Must absolutely fact check. This is now more than any, you need to fact check. Fact check the review if you buy something on Amazon. Fact check on eBay. Fact check. That just needs to be like the new process for everybody doing anything, is check the facts first. And then make a decision. You still may disagree because you don't like the facts, but that's a different choice than just refusing to get the facts. Those are two different things. So I want you guys, as we go into the rest of this week, and as we move forward to the rest of this year, especially as leading up to this election, it is really important to focus on the message. It is really important to focus on the message. And it's really important to focus on the messages that you're telling yourself, the messages you're telling your family, the message you're sending to your kids, to your parents, to your loved ones. Because it's crazy town right now, just about everywhere. And everyone is feeling some kind of stress and unease and discomfort. And so we're not always able to send the messages that we want to send in the way we want to send them, because we ourselves are uncomfortable and distressed and tired and overwhelmed and all those other words. And the other side of that coin is this has given us an opportunity to slow down and pause. Good morning, Houston. It has given us an opportunity to really think again about what's really important and what's not. It has given us an opportunity to spend time with people that we love. When so many people are like, I don't have time, I'm working all the time, I have this commute, I don't get to spend time with my family, I don't get to put my kids to bed, I don't get to see my parents. Now you got time to do that. Now you have to do it safely because we got other issues right now. But this is a time when we've been able to take time. And so that's a good thing. This is a time when a lot of old school management messages have just been proven to be untrue. People can be effective working from home. You do not have to be looking at somebody to know that they're working. Remote work is possible. Connection is possible without being face to face, ear to ear with somebody. The possibilities have been proven now. So a lot of that old school management that was difficult for talent and difficult for cultures and difficult for progress have been disproven. Now it's just a matter of people acknowledging that and acting accordingly. But the facts of those things have been disproven. This is also a time where instead of just going to ground and cutting things loose because times are hard, organizations are finding ways to repurpose. So, like I heard this morning, a number of organizations are saying, you know what, we're not spending as much on medical costs this year because people aren't here. Mm-hmm. But instead of just cutting that out, what we're doing is we're reassigning those monies to things like mental and financial wellness. So we're not taking the budget down, we're just realigning it to what matters for our people. There are many that are saying, we're spending more on people now than we've spent in a long time. But we made a conscious decision that is important to take care of our people right now. Because remember, people will hear what you say, but they'll believe what you do. And they'll remember how you treat them in these times. People will remember how you treat them. So practice the pause and listen to the message. Listen to the message. Don't get distracted by the messenger. Even if that messenger is you and the message is to you. Don't get distracted by all the external stuff. Because there's always something in the message that could be helpful. You're either going to learn something, you're either going to support your position, or you're going to get to a place where you're like, I know I need to not do that anymore. Or it may be something that saves you. But information and gathering information is a good thing in order to help you make the choices you need to make. You just have to be willing to listen and listen actively, to pay attention, to look at body language and what's not said just as much as what's said, and then move accordingly. And that takes time and that takes focus.
When you said that you have to pay attention to the message and you have to listen to, there are certain things you probably never wanted to listen to that it's time to be in tune. When I first became a Christian, it was like, I don't need to know all of that. I'm just trusting God. And then I had to come to the realization, well, God is not running for an office right now. So you need to know some information.
Right.
You need to know some. And I think a lot of people sometimes have gotten in that place. I don't need to know. The less I know, even with the current administration, it's going to it's turning a corner. You know, and you can look at, well, that's positive thinking, but if it's not based in reality, and if it's not based in any underlining, I know we walk by faith but not by sight, but at the end of the day, there is some kind of clue, because the numbers are saying a certain thing. So I think a lot of times many people did not want to get involved because they didn't choose to want to hear the information.
Right.
Somebody told me the other day, no, I didn't watch that because I can't let it take up my brain space. And I said, but you lead people.
Yes.
These are things you're going to need to know.
Yes. Even
as you talked about repurposing, even when I think about the radio station before the pandemic and the way that I was going to program it, it was a lot of different stuff that's different than what he's telling me to do now.
Right.
I talked to you about some things that I wanted to do news-wise, and I'm like, because he'll repurpose a thing to what's more important for where we are now.
Right.
That was cute for where you were back then.
Right.
But now it's another purpose for it now.
Exactly. And that's hard work, right? And it is hard to listen to all the craziness that's going on. It can really take you down. It can be heavy. It just can. And you do have to protect yourself. You do have to protect yourself.
I'm not saying listen to it every day, but you need a piece of knowledge.
Yes. You need to be aware of what is going on around you. You need to be aware of what is going to be impacting you and impacting your family and impacting your job and impacting your health. And you got to be aware. It's really about awareness.
You know what, when you said that, because the political advocate, Tonya Marie, said, there were some things that she said, okay, this is what's in this bill, this is what's in this package. And even Nancy Pelosi told Wolf, the guy from CNN, no disrespect, but you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what's in this package.
Right. You don't know what's in the bill.
Because you can see things for face value and say, I don't care about that, not knowing that. And I've seen some people say, well, I'm not going to vote at all, and they're on Obamacare, but your Obamacare is being threatened to be taken away from you.
Right.
If you don't know the behind the scenes things that are going on.
Sometimes we get overwhelmed and it's too much, and we get paralyzed.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea is instead of allowing yourself to get into paralysis, manage how you intake information. Spend your energy not in trying to keep from being overwhelmed, but in trying to manage the way you intake information so that you don't get to overwhelm in the first place. So like for me, I've stopped turning on the TV first thing in the morning to get the news. I just don't. I do other stuff first, and then I'll turn it on once my mind is right. Because then I need to know what's going on with traffic and weather and all that kind of stuff, because we apparently can't figure out that it's fall yet in Texas. So I have to manage that, and that's what you need to do. Know you, respect you, and love you enough to have enough self-care and self-awareness that you know what your limits are, but you aren't so afraid and in such paralysis that you don't give yourself the information that you need to make good decisions. So it's about management, not hiding. It's about management, not hiding. It's about management, not negating. Because it's going to happen whether you pay attention to it or not. The information is going to be there whether you read it or not. The commercials are going to happen whether you watch them or not. So you get to decide what information you take in so that you can form your opinions and form your perspective and take action. And I would suggest that doing nothing and deciding not to listen is a choice. So you say you're not making a decision, you say you're waiting, but not making a decision is a decision. Not making a decision is a decision. So, with that,
Let me answer this question for you. When you said that, there are so many people who said, well, if I vote, I'm going to vote for Donald Duck or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say
right
to that?
in.
And I said, well, if you're going to do that, just don't do it at all.
Right. You know, I don't quite know what to actually say to people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, when they say something, I start asking why, and I just ask why until I break them down. Right? I'm like, well, why? Well, why? Because, and the point of asking why is not for me to understand why they're doing that, but I want them to understand why they're doing that.
Mm.
And sometimes it's gotten to so many whys that they're like, well, the reality is they just don't want to vote. Well, then just don't vote.
Yeah.
That's not, in my perspective, a wise decision, but just don't vote.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is disruptive, not helpful. And so if you don't want to participate, then just don't participate. Don't just ruin it for everyone else, right? But I tend to ask a lot of questions when people come at me with kind of crazy stuff like that. More for them to really understand why they're saying what they're saying or doing what they're doing versus me. Because at that point, I don't know that it's really important to me.
You don't care.
I wasn't going to say that. But that's what I meant. So I ask a lot of questions. When I see that, I ask a lot of questions. So, well, that's the Rutledge Perspective today, y'all.
I want to shout out to the Philippines today.
Yay! Philippines.
96 people tune in from the Philippines on today. I want to shout out to the United Kingdoms on today for tuning in.
Wonderful.
Mexico, we got them in the building on
Yay.
today as well. We have some other names. We've got Dallas, Fort Worth tuned in on today. St. Louis is tuned in. Los Angeles, Chicago, Charlotte is tuned in. Kansas City is tuned in. San Antonio, Austin is tuned in. Decatur, Springfield, Champaign is tuned in Houston.
Thank y'all so much. I love spending Tuesdays with you guys. Thank you for spending your time with me. We will be back next week, every Tuesday, 10 to 11. See you next time.